There are 60 years of silence behind the door I'm about to open. My name is Maggie Sullivan. I'm 64 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed my Aunt Adelaide was the meanest woman in our family. That's what my mother told me. That's what everyone told me. A woman who chose a house over her own blood, a woman who never called, never wrote, never came when my father died, never sent so much as a card when I got married. That's the story I carried for 6 decades. Then the letter came, a thick white envelope from a law office in Chicago, telling me Adelaide Pemberton had passed away at 87 and that she'd left everything to me, a stranger she'd supposedly never wanted to know. I almost threw it away. I'm glad I didn't. Because what I found in that old house in upstate New York wasn't just furniture and dust. It was a hidden room behind a wall, a piano with a secret inside it, hospital receipts with my dead husband's name on them, letters my mother wrote but never mailed, and the truth about a sister who gave up 24 years of her life so my mother could have one at all. If you've ever been told a story about your family and wondered, just for a moment, if it might not be the whole truth, please stay with me. Because some secrets wait 60 years for the right person to find them. The kettle screamed at 5:30 in the morning, same as yesterday, same as the morning before that, same as every morning for the last 3 years. Maggie Sullivan didn't flinch. Her body had learned the sound the way it had learned everything else after Edmund died, without asking permission, without giving warning, just one more thing she didn't have to think about anymore. Because thinking cost energy, and energy cost money, and money was the only language she still spoke fluently. She lifted the kettle off the burner. The Detroit street outside her window was still dark. 2 of the 3 street lights had given up sometime last winter. The third one flickered like it was about to follow them. Like everything else in her life, holding on, but barely. She poured the water into the chipped aluminum filter, the one Edmund had dropped on a Sunday morning back in 1998 when he was reaching for the sugar jar, and the jar was reaching for him and gravity won. And she had laughed. He had laughed. She had said she would replace it. She never did. Because replacing things costs money, and because some chipped things are easier to keep than to let go of. The coffee drips slow, the way coffee drips when the filter's older than the marriage that bought it. Maggie stood at the sink and watched the steam curl up from the mug. Beyond the window, her neighbor's fence leaned a little further east than it had last fall. One more bad winter and it would be on the ground. One more bad year and so would she. She didn't think that part out loud. She didn't have to. The refrigerator behind her hummed. The refrigerator was covered in paper, not photographs, not magnets, shaped like fruit she had never grown or states she had never visited, just bills, hospital bills, utility bills, a pink notice from the insurance company printed on paper so thin she was afraid to touch it. She had arranged them by urgency, the overdue ones at eye level, the merely terrifying ones lower down. The hopeless ones on the bottom shelf where she couldn't see them unless she bent over. She didn't bend over much anymore. Her back didn't allow it, and neither did her dignity. She drank the coffee standing up. She always drank her coffee standing up now. Sitting felt like surrender. Sitting felt like she was settling in for the day instead of bracing for it, and bracing was what she did. Bracing was what she had become. At 6:15, she put on the cardigan Edmund had bought her for their 30th anniversary, navy blue, slightly too big now. She had lost weight since he died, not on purpose. Grief is a diet plan nobody asked for and nobody wants to follow. At 6:30, she locked the front door. She checked it twice. She always checked it twice. Not because she thought anyone would come in, but because she thought maybe if she made the world small enough, careful enough, locked up tight enough, nothing else could go wrong. It was a lie, she told herself. She knew it was a lie. She told it anyway. The hospital gift shop opened at 7. Maggie's shift started at 7. She unlocked the glass door. She turned on the lights. She straightened the get well cards in their plastic rack. The cards with flowers on the front and blank insides where strangers wrote words they hoped would matter to people who were probably dying. She knew about dying. She had walked these halls when Edmund was upstairs in oncology, walking the same beige tile, smelling the same antiseptic. hearing the same fluorescent lights buzz, the same buzz they had been buzzing since 1987. Hospitals are the loneliest places on earth. Not because people are alone in them, but because everyone in them is alone in exactly the same way. And nobody can help anybody else. She sold a teddy bear holding a satin heart to a man whose wife was on the fourth floor. She sold a bouquet of fake daisies to a teenager whose mother was in ICU. She sold a crossword puzzle book to an old woman who didn't say who she was visiting and didn't have to. At noon, she ate the sandwich she had made at home, wrapped in foil. The foil was on its third use. Foil could be reused if you were careful. Most things could be reused if you were careful. Maggie Sullivan was very, very careful. The mail was waiting when she got home. The mailbox at the curb was the old kind, black metal, red flag that didn't stay up anymore. She pulled out the usual handful, a credit card offer she would shred, a flyer for a church rummage sale, a reminder from the dentist she couldn't afford to visit, and then underneath all of it, a thick white envelope that made her stop walking right there on the cracked concrete path between the mailbox and the porch steps. The paper was heavy, the kind of heavy stock that law offices use when they want you to know the contents matter. Her name was printed clearly in the center, Margaret L. Sullivan, not scrawled by hand the way debt collection letters were scrawled, printed formal, final. The return address was a firm in Chicago, a name she didn't recognize. Pemberton, Walsh, and Associates. She stood on the path and looked at the envelope for a long time. The wind moved the dry leaves around her ankles. A neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm started and nobody bothered to do anything about it. Detroit had stopped reacting to alarms a long time ago. She carried the mail inside. She set her handbag on the kitchen table the way she always did. She poured a glass of water she didn't drink. She sat down. Only then did she pick up the envelope and slide her thumb under the flap and tear it open along the edge. The letter was 3 pages. She read the first page twice before she understood it. Adelaide Pemberton had died. Adelaide Pemberton, age 87, of Millbrook, New York, had passed away on the 14th of last month. Adelaide Pemberton had left a will, and in that will, Adelaide Pemberton had named her sole heir. Margaret Louise Sullivan, née Pemberton. Yeah, Maggie sat back in the chair, so hard the chair creaked. Adelaide. She hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 40 years, maybe 50. In the family mythology, Adelaide had been a closed door, a sealed envelope, a topic her mother Iris would not discuss and would not allow others to discuss and would not even allow to be discussed by accident in passing on the way to other conversations. She made her choice. That was what Iris always said. She made her choice. Best to leave her to it. And then Iris's jaw would set in that particular way. It set when she was swallowing something bitter. And Maggie had learned, before she was old enough to know she was learning, that some questions were not meant to be asked twice. Adelaide was the older sister. Adelaide had stayed behind. Adelaide had chosen a house over her family. That was the story. That was always the story. A cold woman in a cold house, a woman who never called, never wrote, never came when Maggie's father died. Never sent so much as a card when Maggie got married. A woman Maggie had been taught to forget, and now this woman had left her everything. She read the second page. The estate consisted of a guest house and several acres of land in a small town called Millbrook, New York. The property had unpaid back taxes that would need to be resolved within 30 days or the county would seize it. There was a small bank account. There were household contents. There was an attached key. Maggie turned the page over. A small brass key was taped to a separate card, tarnished, no label. The kind of key that didn't open anything important in this world anymore. The kind of key that belonged to a different time, to a different kind of door. She lifted the key off the card. It was lighter than she expected. Most things in her life were heavier than she expected. This was lighter. She read the third page. The third page was a handwritten note, folded once, tucked behind the formal letter. The handwriting was small and even and tilted slightly to the right, the way handwriting tilts when the person who wrote it learned penmanship in a classroom that no longer exists. Maggie, dear, I don't know if you will come. I don't know if your mother told you anything about me. If she did, I am certain she did not tell you the truth. Not all of it, not the parts that matter. If you do come, please, don't believe everything you find at first. Look longer, look in places that don't look like places. Some doors have been closed for a long time. Some of them open easier than you think. The key is for the front door. The other keys you will have to find. Uh, Maggie put the letter down. She put both hands flat on the kitchen table. She looked at her hands. Her hands looked older than she remembered them being. The veins were closer to the surface now. The wedding band was looser than it used to be. She looked at the brass key. She looked at the bills on the refrigerator. She looked at the brass key again. And for the first time in 3 years, she did not think about money. She thought about a woman she had never met, a woman who had called her dear. The phone rang at 7 that evening. It was Margot. Maggie had been expecting the call. Margot was the kind of daughter who knew things were happening before her mother had time to explain them. She worked in finance. She lived in Chicago. She had been divorced for 4 years, and she had a 9-year-old son named Teddy, and she carried the entire weight of her own life and most of her mother's worry on her shoulders without ever, not once, asking to put either of them down. She did not say hello. Mom, who is Adelaide Pemberton? Maggie sat down on the edge of the couch. How do you know that name? A lawyer called me this afternoon, Patricia Walsh's office. She said she'd been trying to reach you. She thought I should know. They didn't have to call you. They did, actually. Mom, who is she? Maggie closed her eyes. She was my aunt, my mother's older sister. You never told me you had an aunt, because I didn't, not really. She wasn't part of the family. Mom, she just left you a house. I know. And land, I know. And you're telling me she wasn't part of the family. Maggie didn't answer. The line was silent for a moment. Margot was thinking. Margot always paused before she pushed. It was the one mercy she allowed before she pushed. Where is it? Upstate New York, a town called Millbrook. Have you ever been there? No. Has anyone in our family ever been there? Margot. Has anyone, not that I know of? Margot exhaled. The exhale was the exhale of a woman who had spent her entire adult life trying to convince her mother to be sensible about money. It was an old exhale. It was a tired exhale. It was the exhale of a woman who loved her mother and was terrified of her mother in equal measure. Mom, sell it. Whatever it is, sell it. There's back taxes. So pay them out of the sale. Mom, you can pay off Dad's hospital bills. You can pay off the roof. You can pay off the car. You can stop counting coins. I haven't decided yet. What is there to decide? I haven't seen it. Mom, Margot, you went there to solve a problem, not to live inside someone else's memories. Maggie opened her eyes. She looked at the brass key on the table. She looked at the cardigan Edmund had bought her hanging on the back of the chair. She looked at the bills on the refrigerator. I haven't gone yet. Then don't make decisions before you go. I'm not making decisions. I'm just not selling it tomorrow. Mom, Margot, I'll call you when I know more. She hung up. She sat in the quiet for a long time. She thought about Edmund, about what Edmund would have said. Edmund would have read the letter twice. Edmund would have looked at the key. Edmund would have looked at her over his reading glasses and said, Maggie, honey, we have to go look. He would not have asked if it made sense. He would have known it didn't have to. 3 days later, she packed a suitcase. The wheel on the right side was broken. It had been broken since the last trip she and Edmund had taken together, Tampa, 2022. He had still been walking then, still been laughing, still been pretending the cough wasn't anything. She packed 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of pants, a nightgown, toothpaste, a travel mug, the letter, the key. She locked the front door. She checked it twice. She got in the sedan and she turned the key, and the engine made the sound from under the hood it always made, and she did what she always did. She ignored it. The mechanic had quoted her $600 to fix it. $600 might as well have been 6,000. The car still ran. The tires were not bald. That was enough. That had to be enough. She pulled out of the driveway at 6 in the morning. She did not look back at the house. She had learned after Edmund not to look back at houses. The drive was long. Detroit to upstate New York is not a drive you do in one day, not at 64, not in a car that makes that sound. She stopped twice the first day, once for gas, once at a rest area where she ate the sandwich she had made at home and watched a family with 3 children eat their lunch at a concrete picnic table. The mother was younger than Margot. The children were younger than Teddy. The father wore a baseball cap and laughed too loud at something one of the kids said, and the kid laughed back, and they were so ordinary, so beautifully ordinary, that Maggie had to look down at her sandwich because her eyes were doing something she could not afford for them to do at a rest stop in Ohio. She got back in the car. She drove until the sun went down. She slept at a motel that cost $49 and had a bedspread she did not let touch her face. The next morning, she drove again. By the second afternoon, she was in New York. By 4, she was on smaller roads. By 5, she was on a road so narrow, the trees on either side of it reached toward each other over the gravel and made a kind of tunnel that the late October light fell through in long amber bars. She had never been here, and yet something about the road, the way it curved, the way the light came through, made her slow down without meaning to, made her grip the steering wheel a little tighter, made her feel like she was driving towards something that had been waiting. The GPS spoke once, turn right in 300 feet. She turned right. The road got narrower, and then it ended. The house appeared after the last bend. It was bigger than she had imagined. That was her first thought. It was bigger, and then her second thought, almost immediately on top of the first one, was that it was not as big as it should have been. Because everything about the way it sat on the land, the way the trees had grown up around it, the way the porch leaned just slightly to the left, suggested that this house had once been beautiful in a way that did not announce itself, and that beauty had been waiting a long time for someone to come look at it. Maggie turned off the engine. The silence was immediate. City silence is not silence. City silence is a low hum of distant traffic and far-off sirens and HVAC units cycling on and off in buildings nobody is in. Country silence is something else entirely. Country silence has texture. It has layers. It has wind moving through high branches and a crow calling once and then waiting and then calling again. She sat in the car for a long minute. She did not get out. She looked at the house through the windshield. The white paint had gone gray with weather. The shutters on the upstairs windows were closed. The garden in front of the porch had gone completely wild. But the path, the stone path leading up to the porch steps, was still there, still traceable, like a sentence half buried under 60 years of grass. Someone had laid those stones. Someone had laid them carefully. She got out of the car. The gravel crunched under her shoes. The air smelled like wet earth and old wood and something faintly sweet she couldn't name. Apples, maybe. There must be apple trees somewhere on the property. Iris had mentioned apples once. Hadn't she, in some half-remembered conversation, Maggie had been too young to pay attention to? She walked up the path. She climbed the porch steps. The brass key turned with more resistance than a new lock would give. But it turned. The door opened with a long, slow creak that seemed to come from deep inside the wood, as if the house itself were exhaling, as if it had been holding its breath for a very long time, waiting to see who would finally come. She stepped inside. The air was cool but not cold. It smelled like dust and dry timber and something else, something faintly floral, the ghost of a perfume someone had worn a long time ago. The hallway opened into a living room. There was a long wooden table in the center, a few chairs around it, pushed in neatly, a couch covered with a thin blanket, framed photographs on the wall, their glass clouded with years of dust but not cracked. Maggie set her bag down on the table. The sound of the bag hitting the wood was louder than she expected, like the house was not used to noise, like the house was startled by company. She walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen at the back, butcher block counters, white cabinets with the paint peeling at the bottoms, a row of small brass hooks under the lowest shelf, each one shaped like a curled leaf. A set of blue-rimmed porcelain dishes stacked in the cabinet, the glaze still holding its color the way good things hold their color. The dining room. A tablecloth folded over the back of a chair, the folds so precise they could only have been made by someone who believed that even linen deserved respect. The narrow staircase. The banister rubbed smooth by decades of hands. Everything was old. Nothing was messy. The house had the feeling of a place whose owner had left very slowly, very deliberately, putting each thing in its proper place before walking out for the last time. She went back to the kitchen. There was a cabinet built into the wall at knee height. She opened it. Inside were 3 cloth-covered notebooks tied with string. She lifted them out and untied the string with hands that were not quite steady. The first notebook was a record of seasonal menus: apple pie in September, onion soup in winter, mint lemon tea for hot days, blueberry cobbler when the berries came in from the garden, never from the store. The handwriting was small, round, remarkably even. The second notebook was a reservation log: guest names, arrival dates, departure dates, notes in the margins. Room 3 needs an extra blanket. Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker like strawberry jam with breakfast. The Lewis child is allergic to pecans. Mrs. Davenport takes her tea without milk but will not ask for it unless you offer. The Peterson anniversary is June 12. Put wildflowers on the nightstand. Not the records of a businesswoman. The records of a woman who paid attention to people the way most people paid attention to weather. Constantly, instinctively, without being asked. The third notebook was different. The third notebook was newer. The cloth on the cover was less faded. The pages had been used more recently. Daily entries, errands, reminders. The kind of running list a person keeps when they are trying to hold a life together without having to think about it too hard. Maggie flipped through. Order Earl Grey. Replace the porch light bulb. Check the pipes before the first frost. Pay the gas bill. She turned the page. Call Iris in Detroit. Try again Thursday night if no answer. The world went very still. Maggie read the line again. Call Iris in Detroit. Try again Thursday night if no answer. She turned the page back. She looked at the date at the top. The date was 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks before Adelaide had died. Iris. Her mother, Iris, had been dead for 6 years. Maggie's hand started to shake. She turned the page forward. There was another entry from 2 weeks ago. Try Iris again. No answer. And another try Iris again. Thursday night this time. Adelaide had been calling Iris every Thursday night for 6 years. Adelaide had not known her sister was dead. Or Maggie's hands went cold. Or Adelaide had known and had been calling anyway, calling a number that nobody would ever answer, calling and listening to it ring and writing it down in her notebook like it was just another errand. Like calling her dead sister was something she did every Thursday night because Thursday nights were when she always called. Maggie closed the notebook. She put her hand flat on the cover. She sat there for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere outside, the wind was moving through high branches. The light through the window above the sink had turned the color of warm amber. Late afternoon, October, upstate New York, a house that had been holding its breath for 60 years. Adelaide had been calling Iris. Whatever story Maggie had been told about her aunt, whatever Iris had said with her jaw set tight and her eyes flat as closed doors, whatever the family had agreed on as the truth for the last 40 years, it was not the whole truth. It was not even close. There was a knock at the front door. Maggie startled so hard she almost dropped the notebook. She set it down carefully on the counter. She wiped her hands on the front of her cardigan. She walked through the living room to the front door, her shoes loud on the wooden floor in a way they had not been loud before. She opened the door. A woman stood on the porch, late 30s, brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, already coming loose on one side, jeans, a wide-sleeved linen shirt the color of cream. She was holding a covered tray and she was smiling in a way that was not professional. Not the way the cashier at the gas station had smiled, not the way the woman at the front desk of the motel had smiled. This was a different smile. This was the smile of someone who had walked this path before and knew exactly where the loose board on the third step was. "You must be Maggie Sullivan." Maggie nodded. She couldn't quite manage words yet. "I'm Hazel Monroe. I live in the house at the end of the road. Word gets around fast in a town this size. I heard somebody had come for the guest house, so I brought blueberry muffins." Maggie looked at the tray. She looked at the woman, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time, the particular warmth of being noticed by a stranger who did not want anything from her. "Thank you. You didn't have to. People here still do that." Hazel held the tray out. Maggie took it. The tray was warm. The muffins underneath the cloth were warm. Somebody had baked these this afternoon for a woman she had never met, in a town she had never visited, about an inheritance that wasn't supposed to make any sense. "Would you like to come in?" Just for a minute, Hazel stepped inside. Her eyes moved across the front of the house the way someone scans a face they haven't seen in years, looking for what had changed, looking for what hadn't. "I used to come here a lot when I was little. My mother helped Miss Adelaide in the winter sometimes, cleaning rooms, changing bed sheets, little things." Hazel paused at the threshold of the living room. Her voice softened. "After my father left, Miss Adelaide gave my mother extra work through the slow months. Never called it charity, never made it feel like a favor. She just said she needed help with the linens. And could my mother spare the time?" Maggie set the tray down on the hall table. You knew her in the way a child knows an adult who lives alone. She wasn't friendly, not the way most people mean. She didn't invite you in. She didn't ask about your day, but she remembered things. She remembered everything. Hazel looked at Maggie carefully. Birthdays, the food people liked, who was sick, who needed something but was too proud to ask. Maggie didn't say anything. She didn't trust her voice yet. Hazel saw it in your family. Was the story different? My mother said she was cold. My mother said she was a woman who had to choose between being seen and being free, and she chose free. Maggie looked at Hazel. Hazel held her chazit. My mother used to say that if you knew Adelaide, you would have understood. But Adelaide didn't let many people know her. Why? I don't know. I was a child. I didn't know to ask the right questions. By the time I was old enough to ask, she had already started locking the doors. About 15 years ago, she changed all the locks in the house. She had a man come up from Kingston to install new deadbolts. She never said why. Maggie felt something turn over inside her chest. "Hazel, why are you telling me this?" Hazel was quiet for a moment. She looked past Maggie into the living room, at the framed photographs on the wall, at the table, at the chairs pushed in so neatly. "Because she talked about you, not by name, not directly, but she would say things sometimes about a niece in Detroit, about a girl she hoped would come one day, and my mother would tell me later. She'd say, 'Hazel, that woman has been keeping a room for somebody for 50 years, and whoever that somebody is, she doesn't even know she has a place to come home to.'" Maggie put a hand on the door frame. She needed it. "I have to go. Stay for the muffins." "I will. I need to look at something first." Hazel nodded. "Go look. I'll let myself out. There's a key under the geranium pot on the porch if you ever lose yours. Adelaide kept one there for 50 years. It's still there." She turned to leave. At the threshold, she stopped. "Maggie, yes." in the kitchen. There's a door behind the staircase. It looks like a closet. It isn't. The handle sticks. You have to lift it a little before it'll open. My mother taught me that. Adelaide showed her once. I don't know why I'm telling you. Maybe you should know. She stepped out onto the porch. She closed the door behind her. Maggie stood in the hallway for a long minute. The house was quiet again. The light through the front windows was the deep amber of an afternoon almost done. Outside the trees, the wind kept moving, and the wind did not care what Maggie did next. She walked back through the living room, through the dining room, into the kitchen. She put her hand on the third notebook. She opened it to a page she had not seen yet, halfway through, a page that had a list of things to do, and then written below the list in slightly darker ink, as if the pen had been pressed harder. If Maggie comes. Front door key in the bottom drawer of the dresser in the back bedroom. Tell her to look behind the painting in the north hallway. Tell her gently. She has been told a lot of lies. Maggie read it 3 times. She read it a 4th time. She closed the notebook. She set it down on the counter very carefully, as if it were made of something that could break, as if she were the one who could break. She walked out of the kitchen. She walked into the hallway. She looked at the staircase. And behind the staircase, exactly where Hazel had said it would be, was a door that looked like a closet. She put her hand on the handle. She lifted it a little, and she heard the lock click open. The door opened into a small room behind the staircase. It wasn't a closet. It was a study. Maggie stood in the doorway and didn't move. The room was narrow, wood-paneled walls, a small desk against the far wall with a green shaded lamp, a leather chair worn smooth on the arms, a window the size of a tea tray looking out into the back garden where the wild roses had taken over the fence line years ago, and on the desk, a single envelope, her name on the front, Margaret, just Margaret, not Maggie, not Margaret Sullivan, just Margaret, written in the same small, even handwriting as the notebook, tilted slightly to the right, the handwriting of a woman who had learned penmanship in a classroom that no longer existed. Maggie walked to the desk. She did not sit down. She picked up the envelope. It was sealed. The seal was a small disc of red wax pressed with the letter A, the kind of seal nobody used anymore, the kind of seal that belonged to a woman who had been waiting a long time to send a letter she could not send. She broke the seal with her thumb. She unfolded the paper. There were 3 pages inside. Margaret, if you are reading this, then you have done what I asked. You have come. I knew you would come. I knew because I have been watching you for 64 years, and I know the shape of your stubbornness. You got it from your mother. Your mother got it from me. Maggie sat down. She had not meant to sit down. Her legs sat her down. There is no easy way to tell you what I am about to tell you, so I will not try to make it easy. I am 87 years old as I write this. My hands are not as steady as they used to be. My mind is... So I will use my mind. Your mother told you I was cold. Your mother told you I chose this house over my family. Your mother told you many things. Some of them were true in the way that a single thread of a coat is true. They were part of a larger fabric. They were not the fabric. The fabric is this: our father was not a good man. Maggie's hand tightened on the page. She read the line again. Our father was not a good man. He drank. That is the part everyone knew. The part nobody talked about is what he did when he drank. And the part nobody talked about even more than that is what he did when he was sober. Because the sober days were worse. The sober days were the days he was deciding which one of us to hurt that night. He liked to think about it. He liked to look at us across the dinner table and decide. He hit our mother until she stopped fighting back. He hit me until I learned to put myself between him and Iris. Iris was the youngest. Iris was the soft one. Iris had a laugh that sounded like a small bell, and our father hated that laugh because it reminded him there was something in the world he could not break. He tried to break it anyway. He came close once. Iris was 12. I was 15. I stepped in front of her. I took what was meant for her. I took it the next time, too. And the time after that, and every time for the next 6 years until Iris was old enough to leave. I helped her leave. I gave her every dollar I had saved working at the bakery on Saturdays. I put her on a bus to Detroit. I told her not to write. I told her not to call. I told her to start over and use a different name if she had to. I told her our father would never come looking because our father did not have the energy for a woman who had figured out how to leave. I stayed I stayed because someone had to, because if I left too, he would have found her, because his rage needed a target. And I was the older one, and I was the one whose job it had always been to stand in front of the smaller one. I stayed for 24 years, Margaret. From the day Iris left until the day our father died. I was 42 when I finally walked out of that man's house. I was 42 when I first lived in a room he could not enter. This house was his. He inherited it from his father. I inherited it from him. I did not want it. I had spent 24 years inside its walls being told who I was by a man who did not know what a person was, but it was the only thing I had. So I stayed. I opened the guest house. I learned to cook for strangers because cooking for strangers was easier than cooking for myself. And I watched your mother live the life I bought her. I do not say that to make her sound ungrateful. She was not ungrateful. She was something else. She was ashamed. Shame is a strange thing, Margaret. It can make a person hate the very thing they should love most. Iris could not bear to know what I had paid for her freedom. So she did the only thing she could do with knowing. She made me into a different kind of person. A cold person, a selfish person, a person who chose a house over her family, because that was a story she could live with. The truth was, a story she could not. Maggie put the page down on the desk. She put her hand on the page. The room was very still. The light through the small window had begun to fade. The green-shaded lamp gave off a soft yellow glow. Outside the window, a small wind was moving through the wild roses. Iris, her mother, her small, fierce mother, who had raised her in Detroit in a third-floor walk-up and had worked 3 jobs and had never once mentioned her own father except to say he had been a hard man, and that hard was the kindest word for him. Her mother, who had pulled Maggie close on cold nights and sung half-remembered lullabies in a voice that always cracked on the high notes. Her mother, who had a laugh like a small bell. Her mother, who had taught Maggie how to be afraid of nothing and grateful for everything, and who had refused every single time to say her older sister's name out loud. Iris. A girl on a bus to Detroit with another woman's wages in her pocket. A girl who had been saved by the sister she would spend the rest of her life turning into a monster. Maggie pressed her hand harder against the page, as if she could push the words back into the paper, as if she could unknow what she now knew. She could not. She picked up the second page. I do not write this to make you angry at your mother. Please understand. I write it because you deserve to know the shape of the love that surrounded you, even when it did not have a name, even when it had to wear a name that was not its own. I have followed your life, Margaret, not in any way that was clever, just in the small ways available to a woman who had no children of her own and a sister who would not speak to her. I knew when you were born. I knew when you started school. Iris's friend Dottie Reinhardt wrote to me twice a year for 30 years, against Iris's wishes, because Dottie was the kind of woman who believed family was not a thing you could throw away, no matter how hard you tried. I knew when you married Edmund. I knew Edmund was a good man because Dottie sent me a photograph of your wedding. I have it still. He had the kind of face that listened. I knew when Margot was born. I have a drawing she made when she was 6 years old, a house with 3 people in front of it. She was here once. Did you know that? Iris brought her the summer Margot turned 6. I did not know they were coming. Iris stood on the porch with a child in a blue coat and said, only, this is my granddaughter, and I said, only will you come in? And Iris did not come in, but Margot did. Margot came in and ate 3 of my cookies and drew me a picture and asked me if I had a cat. I did not, but I lied. I said the cat was outside because I wanted her to come back. She did not come back. I did not blame Iris for that. I had stopped blaming Iris for things a long time ago. Shame is not a choice. Shame is a kind of weather. You live in it until you die. But I kept the drawing, And when Edmund got sick, Maggie stopped reading. She knew what the next line was going to be. She felt it the way you feel weather changing before you can name what changed. She read it anyway. And when Edmund got sick, I knew Dottie's daughter married a man in Detroit who works in hospital billing. The world is smaller than people pretend. He told her, she told Dottie, Dottie told me. I had money, Margaret, not a lot, enough. I had inherited the house and I had run the guest house for 40 years and I had saved every dollar I did not need because I had spent so much of my life with nothing that I did not know how to spend money on myself anymore. I had it and I knew what to do with it. I called Street Catherines. I paid in installments. I paid through a charitable fund I set up in Iris's name, not my name, hers, because if Iris would not let me love her directly, she could at least, without knowing it, save her own daughter's husband. $220,000 over 3 years. That was the cost of giving you another 3 years with him. I would have paid 10 times that. I would have paid everything because Edmund had the kind of face that listened, and because you had finally found a man who listened, and because, Margaret, listening is what nobody in our family ever did for each other. And I wanted you to have one person in your life who knew how you do not have to thank me. Please do not thank me. Because if I am being honest, and there is no point writing any of this, if I am not being honest, I did not pay those bills for you. I paid them for me. I paid them so that I could go to bed at night in this house, in this room, and know that I had been able to do one thing, one single thing that mattered after a lifetime of doing things that did not. That is selfish, I know. Forgive me. Maggie set the page down. She was crying. She had not realized she was crying until the page in front of her had 2 small dark spots on it where the ink had begun to bleed. She lifted her hand to her face. Her face was wet. She did not remember the first tear. She did not remember any of them. She thought about Edmund, about the night they had gotten the call from the billing office 3 weeks into his second round of chemo, when the bill had come back marked paid in full from a charitable fund they had never heard of. She thought about how Edmund had cried, how he had said, Maggie, Maggie, honey, there are good people in this world. There are still good people. She thought about how she had nodded, how she had agreed, how she had thought in some private corner of her mind that maybe Edmund's mother in heaven had pulled some kind of string, some kind of mother's last gift. Edmund's mother had been dead 20 years. Edmund's mother had not pulled the string. The string had been pulled by a woman in a house in upstate New York, a woman with no children of her own, a woman who had inherited a house she did not want from a father she could not name, and who had spent her entire life sitting in a chair by a green-shaded lamp making decisions for people who would never know she had made them. Maggie pressed her hands against her eyes. She breathed. She breathed again. She picked up the 3rd page. I will not ask you to forgive your mother. That is not mine to ask. I will not ask you to forgive me. There is nothing to forgive. I will ask you only one thing. I will ask you to look. Look at this house, look at the rooms, look at the things in them, look at the wall in the north hallway, look behind it. There is a room there that I built for a different kind of life, a life I did not get to live, but a life I prepared for anyway, because preparation is a kind of hope, and I never lost hope. Margaret, I never lost it, even when I should have. If you choose to keep this house, there is a will inside the piano. The lid lifts. You will see what to do. If you choose to sell it, there is also a will inside the piano. It says different things. Both wills are legal. Both have been notarized. Both are real. The one you choose becomes the only one. That is the last gift I can give you. The choice. I love you, Margaret. I have loved you for 64 years. I have loved you in a room with the door closed. I have loved you in silence. I have loved you in the only way I knew how. You do not have to love me back. You only have to know, Adelaide. Maggie folded the letter. She did not stand up. She sat in the leather chair behind the small desk and she folded the letter slowly. She pressed the crease flat with her thumb. She set the letter down on the desk. She put her hand on top of it. The light through the small window had gone almost completely now. The garden outside was a wash of dark shapes. The wind had quieted. The room was lit only by the green-shaded lamp. She sat there for a long time. She did not know how long. She thought about Iris. She thought about Adelaide. She thought about Edmund lying in the hospital bed in the last week of his life, saying again and again that there were good people in the world. There were still good people. He had been right. He had just not known her name. Maggie did not sleep that night. She walked through the house with the green-shaded lamp from the study held in one hand like a candle. She walked through every room. She opened every cabinet. She looked behind every picture. The house was a museum of a life she had not been told existed. In the back bedroom, she found a closet full of women's clothes that had been waiting to be worn out, dresses from the 70s, a wool coat with bone buttons, a hat with a ribbon that had once been burgundy. Everything cedar-scented, everything pressed, everything kept. In the bathroom, she found a row of glass jars containing dried herbs, each one labeled in the same even handwriting: lavender, chamomile, rosemary, thyme for sleeping, sage for the room when guests have been crying. Say, for the room when guests had been crying. Maggie put the jar back on the shelf and she put her hand against the wall to steady herself. In the upstairs hallway, she found a small linen cabinet. Inside were stacks of bed sheets. Each stack had a little tag pinned to it: Room 1 summer, Room 1 winter, Room 2, Room 3 children's room. Children's room in a guest house no children had stayed at in 20 years. Adelaide had labeled them anyway, in case, because preparation is a kind of hope, and she had never lost it. Maggie sat down on the floor of the upstairs hallway. She put her back against the linen cabinet. She put her hands on her knees, and she let herself cry the way she had not let herself cry since the morning Edmund died. She cried for Edmund. She cried for Adelaide. She cried for Iris, who had been a 12-year-old girl with a laugh like a small bell and a sister who had stood in front of her and who had spent the rest of her life unable to look at the woman who had saved her without feeling something she could not survive feeling. She cried for herself, for all the years she had not known, for all the love that had been pouring into her life from a place she had been told to ignore. She slept on the couch in the living room. She slept 4 hours. She woke at 6 and made coffee in Adelaide's kitchen using Adelaide's chipped aluminum filter and Adelaide's blue-rimmed mug. She drank it, standing up. She watched the sun come up over the garden. The wild roses were heavy with dew. At 7, the phone rang. The house phone, a landline, heavy black plastic, the kind of phone that had not been new since 1985. Maggie stared at it. It rang 4 times before she picked it up. Hello, Mrs. Sullivan. A man's voice, smooth, warm in a practiced way. I apologize for the early call. I hope I haven't woken you. Who is this? My name is Bennett Crane. I knew your Aunt Adelaide. I was sorry to hear of her passing. I wonder if I could come by this morning. There are some matters concerning the property I think we should discuss. How did you get this number? Mrs. Sullivan, how did you get this number? A pause. Your aunt and I had a long professional relationship. I have her number on file. My aunt is dead. I'm aware, and I haven't given anyone permission to call this number, Mrs. Sullivan. I think you'll find that what I have to offer is in your best interest. I'd like to come by at 10. Would that be convenient? Maggie looked at the phone. She looked at the kitchen. She looked at the 3rd notebook on the counter where she had left it the day before. 10 is fine. She hung up. She stood by the phone for a long minute. She thought, he has her number on file. He has not had her number on file. Adelaide changed her locks 15 years ago. She didn't trust this man enough to leave him a key. She certainly didn't leave him on her landline. He had pulled the number from somewhere else. He had pulled it because he had been watching the house. He had been watching the house, and he had seen a car arrive, and he had seen lights come on inside, and he had known within 2 days, within 3. He had known there was someone here. He had known there was someone to call. Maggie went upstairs. She washed her face. She put on Edmund's cardigan over the sweater she had slept in. She came downstairs. She was ready. She thought she was ready. Etienne was at the door. The car came up the gravel slowly. A black sedan, polished, recently waxed, the kind of car that did not belong on a gravel road and made sure you knew it. The man who got out was wearing a beige sport coat over a white shirt, dark trousers with a crease that could cut paper, shoes that looked wrong against the gravel, too clean, too city. He was holding a small bouquet of carnations. Maggie watched him through the front window. He walked up the porch with the careful tread of a man who had walked up this porch before. Many times, without permission, she opened the door before he could knock. Mr. Crane. Mrs. Sullivan. Bennett, please. The smile was already on his face. It had been on his face before he got out of the car. It was something he put on with the jacket. He held out the carnations. She did not take them. She stepped aside. He came in. He set the carnations on the hall table without being asked. He looked around the living room with the quick sweep of a man taking inventory. Wall, ceiling, floor, damage, value. His eyes moved like a calculator. Fast, unsentimental. I won't take much of your time, he said. Good. I know the timing is delicate. There are matters that need to be dealt with soon. Property taxes, liability insurance, the zoning records on this stretch of road. I've been keeping an eye on the property for years. It's a beautiful location. Mature trees. The frame is in better condition than most people would guess. If renovated properly, it could become a very attractive weekend retreat. You want to tear it down. That depends on the final plan. It doesn't depend on anything. You want to tear it down. He paused. The smile flickered. It came back. The exterior could be preserved. The interior would need significant modernization. The back kitchen could be opened up. The breakfast room has tremendous potential for floor-to-ceiling windows. As for the wood-paneled cabinets by the north hallway, those would almost certainly need to come out entirely. The moisture damage in spaces like that is usually extensive. Maggie went very still. The north hallway. Yes. What about it? The wood paneling, it would need to be removed. Mr. Crane. Yes. I have been in this house for 48 hours. I have not opened every room. I haven't been down the north hallway. Most of the doors in this house I haven't opened yet. How do you know about the wood-paneled cabinets in the north hallway? The smile did not move. The eyes did. When you've worked in this area for as long as I have, you hear things. People talk. Inspectors file reports. Details accumulate. Inspectors file reports? Yes. My aunt didn't have inspectors in this house. My aunt didn't have anyone in this house. My aunt changed the locks 15 years ago and didn't open the door for anyone after that. So I'd like you to tell me, Mr. Crane, how you know about a wood-paneled cabinet in a hallway that's behind a closed door. Bennett Crane looked at her. For the first time since he had walked in, he looked at her, not at the room, not at the value, not at the inventory. At her. Mrs. Sullivan, how? I think you'll find how. This conversation has gotten away from us. It hasn't gotten away from me. The smile was gone. He set an envelope down on the hall table beside the carnations. He set it down carefully, like a man laying a weapon on a table to show he was not going to use it. Yet, this is a formal offer. The number inside is sufficient to settle every outstanding debt you have. With a considerable amount left over, I would suggest you read it carefully. Then I would suggest you call me by the end of the week. And if I don't, then we will have a different kind of conversation. He walked to the door. He stopped with one hand on the frame. Mrs. Sullivan, your aunt was a stubborn woman. Stubbornness in a woman of her age was charming. In a woman of yours, it can be expensive. The county is not patient, neither am I. He left. The sedan pulled away down the gravel. Maggie stood in the hallway for a long time. She did not pick up the envelope. She did not need to. She knew what it was. It was a threat with a number on it. She called Margot. Margot picked up on the second ring. Mom? He came. Who? Bennett Crane. Mom. I've been calling him. I called his office yesterday. He's offering a fair price. Mom, just take it. You called him. He called me first. Mom, listen. He has investors. He's offering above market. He's offering more than the house is worth. You can pay off Dad's bills. You can pay off the roof. You can stop. Mom, you can stop. Margot. Yes. He knew about a room I haven't even seen yet. What? He knew about a wood-paneled cabinet in a hallway that's behind a closed door. He's been in this house. Margot, he's been in this house when nobody was here. The line was silent. Mom, are you sure? I'm sure. Why would he? Why would he do that? I don't know yet. I will. Mom, please don't do anything dangerous. 64 years old. I drove 1,000 miles by myself in a car that makes a noise. I think I'm past dangerous. That's not. I'm going to find out what he was doing in this house. Then I'm going to decide what to do about him. Mom, sell the house. No. Mom? Margot, I love you. I will call you when I know more. She hung up. She put the phone down on the counter. She picked up the green-shaded lamp from the study. She walked down the hallway toward the north end of the house. The painting at the end of the north hallway was a landscape. A lake at sunset, the kind of painting that exists in 100 guest houses across America and means nothing, the kind of painting nobody looks at twice. Maggie looked at it. She lifted it off the wall. Behind the painting, there was a wood-paneled cabinet built into the wall, the kind Bennett Crane had described, floor to about waist height. The wood was the same as the rest of the paneling in the hallway, but slightly newer, replaced at some point, recently enough that the grain didn't match. She knelt down. Her knees protested. They always protested now. She ran her hand along the edge of the cabinet. There was a small raised molding near the floor, so small that without searching, she would have passed it 100 times. She had passed it. She had walked down this hallway last night with the lamp. She had seen the painting and the cabinet, and she had thought nothing. Beneath the molding, a keyhole, a small one, the kind a brass key would fit. She did not have the key, but Adelaide had told her where the front door key was, bottom drawer of the dresser in the back bedroom, and Adelaide had said, the other keys you will have to find. Maggie went back to the back bedroom. She opened the dresser. The bottom drawer. Inside were folded handkerchiefs, tortoiseshell comb, a stack of envelopes tied with a silver ribbon, and underneath the envelopes, a small brass key tied to a paper tag in Adelaide's hand, family room, open only when you're ready to stay longer than a weekend. Maggie picked it up. She carried it back down the hallway. She knelt in front of the cabinet. She put the key in the keyhole. She turned. Something clicked inside the wall. Dry, precise, the sound of a mechanism that had been waiting a long time to be used and had been kept oiled anyway, because Adelaide kept everything ready. In case. Maggie put her hands on the edge of the panel. She pushed. It did not give. She pushed harder. Dust fell in soft cascades from the seam at the top. She braced her shoulder against the wood, and she pushed with her whole weight, and the panel slid sideways, sticking once, then again, then opening into a space just wide enough for one person. Cool air came out. The air smelled of dry timber and old fabric, and the particular stillness of a room that had not been entered in a very long time. Maggie reached in. Her hand found a switch. She flipped it. A pale yellow light came on overhead. A frosted ceiling lamp, soft, low, just enough. The room was small, almost square, no windows. There was a green velvet armchair, a small couch with a wool blanket folded across the back, a round tea table with turned legs, 2 low bookshelves against the far wall, and in the corner, a small upright piano. On top of the piano, a mantel clock with stopped hands, a porcelain bowl filled with buttons of every color. On every wall, photographs, dozens of them, clipped to ribbons stretched horizontally across the walls, arranged by some private logic only the woman who hung them would understand. Maggie stepped into the room. The light from the ceiling lamp was warm and even. She walked to the first wall. The first photograph showed two young women standing by a lake, their hair lifted by wind. The shorter one was Iris. Maggie recognized her mother instantly. The bridge of the nose, the way she stood with her weight on one hip, the smile wider and less guarded than any smile Maggie had ever seen her wear. The taller one was Adelaide, young, her face turned halfway aside, her mouth curved in a smile that seemed surprised by its own existence. They were standing close together, shoulders touching. The two girls before everything. Maggie moved to the next wall, a photograph of her own first communion, age 7, white dress. Dottie Reinhardt must have sent it. A photograph of her high school graduation, a photograph of her wedding day, a photograph of Edmund holding baby Margot, a photograph of Margot at 6 in a blue coat standing on this porch, a photograph of Margot at 12, at 15, at 25, a photograph of Teddy, 3 years old, 2 years old, newborn. Adelaide had photographs of Teddy as a newborn. Maggie stared at it. She had not sent Adelaide a photograph of Teddy as a newborn. She had not sent Adelaide anything. But Adelaide had it. Adelaide had everything. Adelaide had built a room with no windows to hold a life she had not been allowed to be part of. And she had kept it, all of it, every birthday, every milestone, every face, for 64 years. Maggie sank down onto the green velvet armchair. She put her hands over her face. She heard a sound from the doorway. She did not look up. She did not have to. She knew Hazel was standing there. She had known the moment the front door opened. The house had told her, the way the house told her everything now. "I came to check on you," Hazel said quietly. "You knew about this room." "I knew there was one. I didn't know where. My mother knew. My mother never came in. Miss Adelaide only ever let one person come in here, and that was the woman from the women's shelter in town." Maggie lifted her head. What? Once a month, Miss Adelaide had a woman from the shelter come for tea in this room. They would sit in this room for 2 hours. Then the woman would leave with an envelope. Miss Adelaide gave money to the shelter every month for 30 years through that woman. So her name was never on the books. She gave money to a shelter for battered women and their children, mostly their children. Maggie looked around the room. She looked at the photographs. She looked at her whole life on the walls. She looked at the buttons in the porcelain bowl. She looked at the piano in the corner. Hazel. Yes. Why do you think she did all of this? Hazel was quiet for a long moment. She stepped into the room, just a step. She looked at the photographs on the wall, the wedding pictures, the baby pictures, the whole family she had not been part of. My mother used to say that some people love so quietly that you only realize they were loving you after they're gone because they didn't know how to do it any louder. They were afraid of what would happen if they did. Afraid of what? Of having it sent back. With a note that said, "No thank you." Maggie sat in the green velvet armchair. She did not move. The light through the ceiling lamp was steady and warm. Outside, somewhere very far away, a car was coming up the gravel road, faster than Bennett Crane had driven. The engine was familiar. Maggie turned her head. She knew the engine. It was Margot. Margot had come. Margot had driven from Chicago, and Margot did not know yet. Margot did not know about the letter or the bills or the shelter or the room or the photograph of Teddy as a newborn that her mother had never sent, and her great aunt had somehow received and had kept on a wall in a room with no windows for 9 years. Maggie stood up. She walked out of the family room. She walked down the north hallway. She opened the front door. Margot was standing on the porch with Teddy beside her. Teddy was holding a comic book. Margot's face was tight with the particular tension of a woman who had driven 8 hours, fueled by fear and frustration in equal measure. Mom, you came. You weren't answering your phone. I was in a room. What room? Maggie looked at her daughter. She looked at her grandson. She looked at the comic book in Teddy's small hands. And she stepped aside. Come in, she said. There's a room you need to see. Margot stepped inside. Teddy followed, holding his comic book against his chest like a small shield. The house smelled different to Margot. She didn't know how she knew that. She had never been in this house. Or she had been in it once a long time ago when she was 6, and the smell had been waiting for her ever since in a part of her memory she didn't have a name for. She stopped in the front hallway. She looked at her mother. Her mother looked like a woman who had been crying for 2 days without sleeping. Mom, Margot, what happened? Alot, you look terrible. Thank you. I didn't mean, I know what you meant. Maggie reached out. She put her hand on Margot's shoulder, the way mothers do when they're about to say something they've been rehearsing. Except Maggie had not been rehearsing. Maggie had not known her daughter was coming, so she just stood there, hand on her daughter's shoulder, mouth open, nothing coming out. Teddy walked past both of them. He walked into the living room. He stopped in the middle of the rug. Grandma, yes, sweetheart, this house is really old. I know. It smells like my friend Hugo's grandma's house. That's a good smell. It is. He turned in a slow circle. He looked at the pictures on the wall. He looked at the table. He looked at the chairs pushed in too neatly. And then he looked at his mother. And he said, with the perfect blunt clarity of a child who has not yet learned to ask permission to know things, Mom, why does this house feel like I've been here? Margot Frazi. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie freeze. It was just a stillness that came over her shoulders and her hands and the muscles around her eyes all at the same time. Like her body had gotten the message before, her mind had, Teddy, you haven't been here? It feels like I have. You haven't. Okay. He went back to looking at the wall. Margot turned to her mother. Mom, what is happening? Come with me. Mom? Margot, come with me. Maggie took her daughter down the north hallway. She did not say anything as they walked. The hallway had a long runner that softened their footsteps. The light from the small window at the end of the hall was a deep October amber. Outside, the wind was moving through the high branches. The painting was already off the wall. The panel was already open. Margot stopped at the threshold. She did not step inside. She looked into the room with the wide, unguarded face of a woman who is about to understand something she has spent her whole life almost remembering. The green velvet armchair, the small couch, the piano, the walls. She saw the photographs. She saw herself at 6, at 12, at 15, at 25. She saw her own wedding photo, her own son's newborn photo, photos she had posted on social media, photos she had emailed to coworkers, photos she had texted to her mother, photos that had traveled the small, ordinary distances of an ordinary modern life and had ended up here in a room with no windows, in a house she had not been to since she was 6 years old. She put her hand on the door frame. She needed it. Mom, I know. Mom, I know. How does she have, that's Teddy's hospital photo. I sent that to like 10 people. I know. Mom, who is this woman? She was my aunt. Mom, I have a letter for you. I have a lot of things to show you. But first, I think you should sit down. Margot stepped into the room. She sat down in the green velvet armchair, the same chair her mother had sat in 2 hours ago, the same chair Adelaide had sat in for 40 years. The cushion remembered them all. 3 women, 3 generations, 1 chair. Margot's hands were shaking. She did not seem to notice. Maggie picked up the stack of envelopes from the tea table, the ones tied with the silver ribbon. She handed them to her daughter. "Read these," she said. "Start with the one on top." She walked out of the room. She closed the panel behind her so that her daughter could be alone with 60 years of letters that should have been hers. In the kitchen, Maggie put the kettle on. Teddy was sitting at the table. He was drawing on the back of a paper grocery bag he had found in the pantry. He was drawing the house, triangle roof, square windows, three figures standing in front of it, one tall, one medium, one small. "Grandma?" "Yes, Teddy." "Is this your house now?" "I don't know yet." "You don't know." "I'm trying to decide." "Why is it hard?" Maggie poured the hot water into the chipped aluminum filter. "Because it isn't just a house." "What is it?" "I think it's a question." "What's the question?" "Whether I'm willing to live inside and answer." Teddy thought about this for a moment. He was 9. He had not yet developed the polite reflex of pretending to understand things he didn't. "That doesn't make sense, Grandma." "I know, but you can keep saying it if you want." "Thank you." She sat down next to him at the table. She watched him add a small dog to the picture, off to the side, looking up at the three figures. There had never been a dog in any version of her life. He had drawn one anyway, because 9-year-olds know what families should look like, even when they're not getting one. "Teddy." "Yeah." "Do you remember anything from before you were born?" "That's a weird question, Grandma." "I know. No, I don't." "Okay. Why?" "No reason." He drew a window in the door of the house. He drew a face looking out of the window. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Who's looking out the window?" She looked at the drawing. She looked at the small face Teddy had drawn behind the door, peering through the little square he had made. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe someone who was waiting for us to come." "For us?" "For someone for 60 years." She looked at him. "How did you know it was 60 years?" He shrugged. He didn't look up from his drawing. "You said it before, in the hallway." She had not said it before, not out loud. She put her hand on his back. "Teddy." "Yeah. Sometimes you say things that scare me a little." "Is that bad?" "No. I think it's good. I think it means you're paying attention." "To what?" "To something most people forget how to pay attention to." He smiled. He kept drawing. She watched him. She thought, his face is Edmund's, the exact tilt of the chin, the exact way the mouth pulls to the left when he's concentrating, and he doesn't know he was 6 when Edmund died. He barely remembers him. He just is him, in small ways, in ways nobody can take away. She thought, this is what Adelaide must have done for 60 years. She just sat in a room and watched the people she loved be the people she loved, through photographs, through other people's letters, through the small ordinary mail that travels between strangers when the people you love won't speak to you anymore. She thought, I am not going to sell this house. She thought it once clearly, the way she had not thought anything clearly in 3 years. And then she stood up, because if she sat with it any longer, she would start to be afraid. In the family room, Margot was reading. She had read 4 of the letters. She was halfway through the 5th. Her face had gone through several different countries of grief in the last 40 minutes. She had cried twice. She had laughed once at something Adelaide had written about a Sunday in 1991, a small wry sentence about a goose that had taken up residence in the front yard and refused to leave. She had stopped reading 3 times to look at the wall of photographs. She did not look up when her mother came back in. Maggie sat down on the small couch. She waited. After a long minute, Margot set the letter down on her knee. She looked at her mother. Mom, I know. She paid for Dad's chemo. I know. She paid for my drawing class. When I was 11, the summer Dad lost his job. You remember I had that art class at the community center. You said you couldn't afford it, and then a scholarship came through. Mom, there was no scholarship. There was her. It says it right here. She held the letter up. Maggie took it. She read, Margot started a drawing class. Iris does not know, I know. The class is $52 for the summer. I sent it to the community center anonymously. The director thinks it came from a local Rotary fund. The Rotary fund does not exist. I made it up. I am very pleased about this. Maggie put the letter down. She started to laugh. It was not a normal laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who has run out of other ways to react to the world. What Margot said, she made up a Rotary fund. Mom, she made up a fake charity to send you $52 for art class. In 1997, Mom, she is so much like you. What, Margot, you make spreadsheets when you're upset. You build little systems to make things work. You handle problems by inventing structures. She invented a Rotary fund. Margot looked at her mother. She looked at the letter. She looked at the wall. And then she started to laugh too. It was the same laugh. It came from the same place. It was the laugh of a woman who had spent her whole life being told her stubbornness was a flaw and was suddenly realizing it had come from somewhere, and the somewhere had loved her. They sat in the family room and they laughed for about a minute, and then they cried again. Hazel came back at 5 with a casserole. She did not ask questions. She set the casserole on the kitchen counter and she said, "There are paper plates in the cabinet over the fridge if you don't want to do dishes." And then she left. Because Hazel was the kind of woman who knew when to be in a room and when not to be. Margot and Maggie ate at the kitchen table. Teddy ate on the floor in the living room because he had decided the living room rug was a kingdom and he was its only citizen. Margot had a piece of muffin in one hand and a fork in the other, and she was looking at her mother across the table the way she had not looked at her mother in maybe 10 years. Mom, yes. When I was 6, yes. Grandma brought me here. She did. I don't remember the trip. I remember pieces. Cinnamon, a cat, the porch. There wasn't a cat. Adelaide lied. She wanted you to come back. She wanted me to come back. Yes. Margot set down the fork. She looked at the table. Why didn't Grandma ever tell me? I don't know. You don't know, Margot. I don't think Grandma told anybody anything, including herself. I think she lived inside a story she couldn't change, because changing it would have meant looking at what she did. And I don't know if she could have survived looking. What did she do, Mom? Maggie took a breath. She told her daughter. She told her about Walter Pemberton, about what Adelaide had stood in front of for 24 years so that Iris could leave, about the bus to Detroit, about the bakery wages, about the silence that had followed. Margot listened. She did not interrupt. When Maggie finished, Margot sat very still for a long time. So Grandma, yes, Grandma made her sister into a villain. Yes, because if she didn't, she would have had to admit what her sister had done for her. And she couldn't, Mom, yes. Is that the worst thing I've ever heard? Or the most human thing? Both? I think they're often the same thing, sweetheart. Margot put her hand flat on the table. She looked at her mother. Mom, yes, I'm sorry. For what? For telling you to sell the house. You didn't know, neither did you. That's true, but you came anyway. Adelaide told me to, in the letter. She said, look longer, look in places that don't look like places. She knew you would. She knew somebody would. She prepared for it. The whole house is prepared, Margot. There's labels on the bed sheets. There's herbs for guests who have been crying. The cabinets are labeled in case children came to stay, children, Margot, in a guest house. She labeled the linens for children who weren't coming for 60 years. Margot wiped her face with the back of her hand. Mom, what are we going to do? I don't know yet. You said it's a question. It is. Are you ready to answer it? Almost. That night, Maggie did not sleep upstairs. She slept on the small couch in the family room. She wanted to be near the wall of photographs. She wanted to be near the piano. She wanted to be in the room that Adelaide had built with her own hands for a life she had not gotten to live, and she wanted that room to know somebody was finally sleeping in it. She woke at 4 in the morning. The room was very dark. She lay there for a long time and she thought about the letter, specifically the part about the piano. If you choose to keep this house, there is a will inside the piano. The lid lifts. You will see what to do. She got up. She walked to the corner of the room. She put her hand on the lid of the small upright piano. She lifted it. The lid was hinged. It opened easily like it had been opened recently. Inside, between the felt strips and the hammers, was a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a small disc of red wax pressed with the letter A. Maggie pulled it out. She carried it back to the couch. She sat down. She broke the seal. There were 2 documents inside. The first was a will, notarized, dated, witnessed by 2 people Maggie didn't know. It was handwritten in Adelaide's neat tilted script with a typed legal page attached to make it official. The will said this: if Margaret Louise Sullivan chose to keep the property at 14 Larkin Hollow Road, Millbrook, New York, and to reside in it for a minimum of 1 year, a trust account at First National Bank of Millbrook, in the amount of $295,000 would be released to her. The trust had been funded by the sale of certain bonds and the savings Adelaide had accumulated over 40 years of running the guest house. If Margaret chose to sell the property within the first year, the full amount of the trust would transfer to the Millbrook Women's Shelter in honor of Adelaide's sister Iris Pemberton. Either choice was valid. Either choice was binding. Adelaide had not made the decision easier. She had made it possible. The second document was a letter, shorter. Margaret, if you have found this, you have found a great deal. I am sorry for how much it must hurt, but I would not have wanted you to keep this house without knowing what came with it. A house is only a house until you understand whose hands built it. After that, it is something else. The $295,000 is not a fortune. It will not solve every problem. It will pay the back taxes. It will pay off your debts. It will repair the roof. It will leave you with enough to live more carefully than you have been living. Carefully, but not desperately. There is a difference. Iris never learned the difference. I want you to, if you stay, the guest house is yours to do with as you wish. I have a quiet hope. I will not impose it. But I will say it, the shelter in town does not have enough housing. There are women who leave and have nowhere safe to go for the first 2 weeks. The hardest 2 weeks, if you ever wanted to, the guest house could be that for them. 2 weeks. A bed, a meal, a door that locks from the inside. That is what I needed. At 16, that is what every woman who has ever left needs. The first 2 weeks, just a thought, do what you want. The house is yours. Maggie folded the letter. She held it against her chest. She sat in the dark family room with the piano lid still open behind her and the wall of photographs at her back and her daughter sleeping upstairs in the room Adelaide had been keeping for 60 years. She did not cry this time. She had cried enough. She just sat there and she said out loud to a woman who could not hear her, "Thank you, Aunt Adelaide." It was the first time she had ever said her aunt's name without bitterness. It was the first time she had ever said it at all. Bennett Crane came back the next morning. He was not alone. He came up the gravel road in his black sedan, and behind him came a smaller white car, a lawyer's car. The man who got out of the white car wore a gray suit and carried a folder. He had the expression of a man who had been told he was going to win something today and was looking forward to it. Maggie watched them from the front window. Margot stood behind her. "That's him?" "Yes." "He brought a lawyer." "He did. Mom, Margot, what are we going to do?" "You're going to stand right where you are. Hazel's on her way. She has something I asked her to bring." "What?" "You'll see." Maggie went to the front door. She opened it. She did not invite Bennett in. She stepped out onto the porch. She closed the door behind her. The porch was wide enough for two people to stand on without crowding. Bennett stood at the top of the steps. His lawyer stood a half step behind him. Both of them looked up at her with the practiced patience of men who had decided in advance that this was going to be easy. Mrs. Sullivan, Bennett said, "I hope you've had time to review the offer." "I have, and I'm not selling the house." The smile flickered. It did not come back this time. "Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Crane, I think you may not understand the position you're in. Try me. There is a boundary dispute regarding the northern parcel of this property. A 15-year-old contract between myself and your late aunt establishes my pre-existing claim to a portion of that land. Without resolution of this dispute, the property cannot be cleanly conveyed, sold, or developed by anyone, including you. The county will not allow it. This is not a threat, this is the law." Maggie waited. She waited until he was finished. Then she said, "Mr. Crane, yes, you signed a contract with my aunt 15 years ago. I did. And then you filed an amended development plan with the county that violated every condition of that contract. Mrs. Sullivan, you agreed to residential use, you filed for commercial, you agreed to preserve the tree line, you filed to clear it, you agreed to keep the access road open. You filed to close it and route a new one through the back parcel. Where did you..." My aunt kept every piece of paper in a room you didn't get to see, the room you were trying to get to, by tearing down the wood paneling in the north hallway, which you know about, because you have been in this house when nobody was here. The lawyer next to Bennett shifted his weight. The lawyer was new at this. The lawyer had not been briefed on the part where the old woman had a room. "That's a serious accusation," the lawyer said. "It is. Do you have evidence?" "Yes." A car was coming up the gravel road. A truck, Hazel's truck. Hazel pulled up behind Bennett's sedan. She got out. She was carrying a rolled-up document tube under one arm. She walked up the porch steps without acknowledging Bennett or his lawyer, the way you walk past a stranger on a public sidewalk. She handed the tube to Maggie. "Thank you, Hazel." "You're welcome." Hazel stayed on the porch. She crossed her arms. Maggie unrolled the document. It was the cadastral map from 1952, the original survey of the property. Thick paper, sharp lines, drawn by a man named Henrik Olson, county surveyor, who had signed his name in the lower right corner in faded ink. The map showed the boundaries clearly. The northern parcel ended at the line of oak trees Adelaide had planted in 1971. Bennett's claimed land sat 50 yards to the east, outside the property entirely. Maggie handed the map to Bennett. "Mr. Crane, your contract with my aunt was for a piece of land that isn't on this property. Either the contract was fraudulent or you've been operating for 15 years on a survey error. Either way, there is no boundary dispute because there is no overlapping land, because the land you claim is on the other side of County Road 12. The lawyer was reading the map now. The lawyer's face had gone pale. "This is the original. I want to verify it. The county clerk has a copy. So does the Historical Society. So does my aunt's attorney in Chicago, Patricia Walsh, who has already filed her response to your office this morning. The map was registered in 1952. It has not been amended. The boundary you're claiming has never existed." Bennett did not move. He did not speak. His eyes were on Maggie. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a door that he thought he had a key to and has just realized doesn't have a keyhole at all. "Mr. Crane," Maggie said. She said it quietly. She said it without any of the warmth or the apology or the deference that women her age were trained to put into the voices they used with men in suits. She said it the way Adelaide would have said it. "You walked into this house when my aunt was not in it. You took measurements, you took notes, you took an inventory of a life that did not belong to you. I cannot prove you committed a crime in 2011. The statute of limitations has likely expired anyway. So I am not going to take you to court." Bennett did not look reassured. "What I am going to do," she said, "is keep this house." I am going to fix the roof. I am going to repair the porch. I am going to open the guest house in the spring. And I am going to use it to house women who are running from men like the one who built this place. Men like my grandfather. And in some smaller, more polite way, men like you. Bennett opened his mouth. He closed it. The lawyer touched his elbow. The lawyer had figured out faster than his client had that this was no longer a situation that could be improved by lawyers. I want you off my porch, Maggie said. Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Crane, I want you off my porch. He went. The black sedan pulled away down the gravel road. The white car followed. Maggie stood on the porch. Her hands were not shaking. She thought, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I had it in me. I didn't know it was in there, but it was. The whole time. It must have been Iris. It must have been Iris all along. She thought, no, it was Adelaide. She thought, no, it was both of them. It was both of them, and it was me. It was 3 women who finally got to be in the same room together, even if 2 of them were dead. She stood on the porch a long time. She watched the sedan disappear past the line of oak trees Adelaide had planted in 1971. She went inside. She closed the door. Margot stayed for 5 more days. She was supposed to leave on the 3rd day. She did not. She called her office. She called her client. She called the woman who watched Teddy after school. She rearranged her life by phone, sitting on the porch steps with a notebook on her knee, the way her great-aunt had once rearranged a town by phone from a study with a green-shaded lamp. In the mornings, Margot helped her mother clean. In the afternoons, they walked the property. They walked to the line of oak trees. They walked to the small lake at the back of the land. They walked to the greenhouse with its cracked panes and the brick path that wound through the wild roses. Teddy painted the window box outside the kitchen. He chose a color from the dozens of old paint cans in the greenhouse. He chose blue, the exact blue of the coat Margot had worn in the photograph from when she was 6. He did not know why he chose it. He just did. Maggie watched him paint, and she did not say anything. Some things you don't explain to children, some things they choose on their own. Because the things they choose on their own are the truest things they will ever know about themselves. On the last evening, Margot and Maggie sat on the porch. The October light was nearly gone. The sky was the color of old gold. The bird that lived in the high branches called from somewhere far back in the trees. Margot said, Mom, yes. Are you really staying? Yes. For a year. For as long as it takes, as long as what takes. Maggie thought about the question. She thought about it for a long time. As long as it takes for me to stop being afraid of the rooms, she said. Mom, I have been afraid for 3 years, Margot. Of every room in my house. Of every room that used to have him in it. I have been walking around the edges of my own life like I might break it. I came here and I was afraid of these rooms too. But these rooms, they aren't haunted by him. They're haunted by her. And she wanted me here. She has wanted me here for 64 years. And there is something I want to know what it feels like to live in a room that was built by someone who wanted me to come. Margot did not answer. She put her hand on her mother's hand. They sat there. Teddy, somewhere inside the house, was playing a single note on the piano. Over and over. He had found the piano. He had opened the lid. He had pressed the lowest key. He pressed it. He pressed it again. He pressed it again. He was finding out what a note sounded like in a room that had been quiet for a long time. Maggie listened. The note was flat. Years of disuse. The strings needed tuning. But the note was there. The room remembered how to hold it. Margot and Teddy left the next morning. Maggie stood in the driveway and watched the car go. Margot had hugged her so hard at the door that Maggie had felt her daughter's heartbeat through the fabric of her coat. Teddy had hugged her around the waist and said, "I'm coming back, Grandma." And Maggie had said, "I know you are." She watched the car until it disappeared past the line of oak trees. She went back inside. The house was quiet. but it was a different quiet now. She walked into the kitchen. She put the kettle on. She opened the third notebook on the counter, the one Adelaide had been writing in until 3 weeks before she died. She turned to the last entry. Below the last entry, there were empty pages, dozens of empty pages. Adelaide had left room. Adelaide had always left room. Maggie picked up the pen on the counter beside the notebook. She wrote, "Call Margot on Sunday. Check the porch light. Order Earl Grey. Call the man in Kingston about the roof. Visit the women's shelter on Tuesday. Ask about the spring. Begin preparing the rooms." She paused. She wrote one more line. "Aunt Adelaide, thank you for waiting." She closed the notebook. She poured the tea into Adelaide's blue-rimmed cup. She carried the cup out to the front porch. She sat down in the rocking chair, the one with the armrests rubbed smooth by 60 years of one woman's hands resting in the same position. She put her own hands in the same place. Her hands fit. The wood remembered the shape. The sun was going down. The first stars came out, faint, tentative, as if they weren't sure they were welcome. Maggie took a sip of tea. It was too hot. She held the cup anyway. She felt the warmth move through her palms and up her wrists and into her chest. And something that had been frozen in there for 3 years, or maybe longer, maybe 64 years, began very slowly to thaw. She thought, there are people who love us in ways we never see. They love us with money we don't know about. They love us with rooms we'll never enter. They love us in silence, in handwriting nobody else will read, in photographs they keep on a wall in a house we've never been to. Most of them die before we find out. Most of them go to their graves never having been thanked. And we walk around our lives thinking we are alone when the whole time, there has been somebody. Adelaide Pemberton sat in this chair for 40 years. She drank tea out of this cup. She watched this sun go down. She thought about her sister. She thought about her sister's daughter. She thought about her sister's daughter's daughter. She thought about a small boy named Teddy who painted a window box blue without knowing why. She thought about all of us. She thought about us so hard for so long that when I finally walked through her front door, the house already knew my name. Maggie sat on the porch. The tea grew cool in her hands. Behind her, the house stood solid and imperfect, full of rooms she had not yet opened and stories she had not yet read. And the family room behind the wall, where a woman who had never learned how to say "I love you" had spent her whole life saying it. In every other way, she knew how. If Adelaide could have seen this moment, the porch, the cooling tea, the woman sitting in her chair, looking out at the same trees she had watched for 60 years, she might have folded her hands in her lap. She might have nodded once, the way she did when something turned out the way she had hoped, but had not dared to expect. She might have reached for her pen. She might have written one last note in the margins of her notebook, between a reminder to order Earl Grey and a note to check the pipes before the first frost. She came, she stayed, and that would have been enough.